Awesome. So let's make a start. We've got so many beautiful faces on this call, which is really, really exciting. So thank you so much for giving up an hour and a half of your time to join us for Code with Xero. We've got a jam-packed session and lots to get into. So yeah, welcome. To start off with, let's do some introductions so you can meet the Xero team and see who's on the call today. So next slide, please, Alice. So just to introduce myself first, so I'm Ellen Nash. I'm part of the grad team alongside Alice, and I'm based in Melbourne. So I look after all the grad recruitment for all the Australian roles, both Melbourne, Canberra and Sydney. I've been at Xero for just over a year now. Fun fact about me, I'm growing a human at the moment, which is very exciting. They're giving me a couple of kicks as I speak. And human is also one of our hashtag values. So that's a good little plug there. So we'll go down the list and I'll hand over to Alice to introduce herself as well.
I like your fact, Ellen. Hi everyone, I'm Alice. As Ellen just mentioned, we both run the graduate and intern programs. Ellen runs it for Australia. I run it here in New Zealand. I'm based in the Wellington office. I had my first Xeroversary, which is my first sort of birthday at Xero yesterday. So I've been here just over a year. And as you can tell by my accent, I'm British. So fun fact about me, I'm British, but I'm part Kiwi and I only moved here a couple of years ago, but actually have 3 generations of New Zealanders behind me, despite how I sound. So yeah, over to you, Darren.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren. I'm a senior engineer / acting team lead and formerly a grad team lead, which meant that I worked with the grad team, which was great fun. You may or may not be able to tell by my accent, but I'm actually Australian. I moved over to Wellington about 3.5 years ago to start my job at Xero, and I love it here. And my fun fact is that my kids are probably going to come home halfway through this meeting and bust into the office door, so I'll try and mute as fast as I can if that does happen. Over to Nick.
Cool, thank you very much, Darren. My name is Nick Piesco. I am a senior engineer on the design systems team here based in the Wellington office. As you can tell from my accent, I am also not a Kiwi. I assure you we have Kiwis that work here in the Wellington office. It just turns out that none of them are here on this call. Yeah, I'll be presenting the front-end development portion of this. Fun fact about me, tech is a second career for me. Before going into tech, I was a meteorologist for 14 years. Over to Lena.
Hi everyone, I'm Lena. I am one of the engineers at Xero. I have a very long history of how I got here and lived in a couple of countries, but a fun fact about me is that I have a really adorable cat at home, and everybody gets a lot of photos of him at the office.
Awesome, perfect. Well, that's the team who's going to be with you today. So you'll be hearing from all of us throughout the presentation. I'd love to go around the call and meet everyone, but we've got quite a few people. So unfortunately, I think that would probably take the whole time if we did that. But yeah, really happy that you guys are being able to join us. Cool. So let's talk about the agenda and what we're going to cover today. So start off with a bit of an introduction to Xero. Hopefully a lot of you have heard about us and kind of know who we are, but if not, I'll just give you a bit of a very quick rundown on the company and just touch briefly on our kind of, what our purpose is, what our values are, before handing over to the team to get into the coding with Xero, which is what you're all here for, to go through the demo and hear a bit more about our front end and back end tech stacks. And we'll then finish at the end, and my colleague Alice will talk a little bit about the junior talent program, so about the opportunities available in our grad and intern roles, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. Cool, next slide please. Just a bit of housekeeping, just because there are quite a few of us on the call, if you could keep your mics off throughout, that would be great. If you know, halfway through you're thinking, oh, this isn't for me, you know, feel free to drop off the call at any time. You know, we won't be offended. That's absolutely fine. We will be we are recording this session as well. So if you're not able to join for the full amount, but you'd like to see the rest of the recording, just drop us an email afterwards and we can share that with you. We definitely welcome questions. We'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So anytime throughout the presentation, drop your questions in the chat field on the Google Meet, and the team will kind of answer them as we go. And then at the end, when we do the Q&A, we can open it up and invite you to either come off mute and speak your question, or if you'd prefer just to type your question in the chat, that's absolutely fine as well. Awesome. So just to give you a little bit about Xero, so we're a global leader in online accounting software. So here's a quick image of what our platform looks like. A few of you might be familiar with it if you're kind of entrepreneurs, have got a side hustle and use our accounting software, or if you've got family that run a business. So our main aim is to support small and medium-sized businesses. So that's our jam. We don't target kind of big, large companies. It's the small and medium-sized business space. And we do what we can to help them with running their business. If anyone's had experience of running small businesses, you know, it can be quite stressful. So we want to make sure that our software makes life easier for them, and is kind of smooth and helps them with all their kind of financial and accounting needs. So whether that's providing kind of visibility of, you know, what their financial and cash flow looks like, whether that's issuing invoices, paying their employees, and all the good stuff that comes around there. So hopefully that gives you kind of a bit of a taster of kind of the Xero product and what we're all about. Next slide, please, Alice. Awesome. So just to touch on our purpose, to bring it to life a little bit more. So I guess the purpose of anyone in any company is, you know, why do we get up out of bed in the morning? Why do we turn our laptops on? Why do we come to work? And for us at Xero, our purpose is to make life better for people in small business, their advisors and communities around the world. So, you know, for us, it's not just about kind of giving them tools or selling them a product. You know, we want to try and help them with whatever we can in respect to running their small business. And it doesn't just, you know, stop at them. It can be their advisors. So if they work with an accounting practice, and their communities as well. So, I mean, Xero is an awesome company if, you know, you want to have direct impact in supporting small businesses and the economy, which is pretty exciting. And we're pretty global as well. So we've got offices all around the world, which we'll cover off as well. Awesome. So if that's our purpose, we'll just flick on to the next slide and talk a little bit about our vision. So if our purpose is, you know, why we get out of bed in the morning, our vision, oh, sorry, Alice, if you could just go back one slide. Cool, perfect. So our vision is kind of our end state, you know, where do we want to be? And for us, it's to be the most insightful and trusted small business platform. So, you know, insightful, that's a big underpinning for us. So, you know, we don't just want to kind of record data and play it back to small businesses, but we want to find ways of how can we present that data back in new and insightful ways, and really try and help small businesses kind of connect the dots and really add value there. Trust is a big one for us as well. I mean, you know, trust doesn't win you customers, but it definitely loses you customers pretty quickly. So to be trusted by our customers and users is a massive priority for us. And lastly, business platform. So what I mean by business platform, you know, it's not just about the kind of core product that Xero have built and that we sell to our customers, but it's about connecting other providers through our platform as well. So we've got a large ecosystem of about 800 apps that have connected into Xero platform for an API, and that really kind of enables us to be kind of the middle person, you know, bringing other businesses and apps and connecting them with our users, you know, to try and sort of broaden out our service and seeing if we can, you know, be really impactful and offer our users lots of great opportunities and products to use. Perfect. If you wouldn't mind skipping to the next slide. Awesome. So just a very brief timeline. So we started in 2006 in Wellington in a living room, and we started with 4 staff. Speed forward to present day, we've now got about 3,500 staff across the globe and over 2 million customers. So as you can see, we've grown hugely and we're still growing. So really exciting time to potentially join Xero. The image on here is some of the original Xeros who were here at the start. I think this might have been the dev team actually that got some of the products up and running, and a lot of these faces are still here, so you'll still see them sort of walking around the office, which I think is such a great testament for the culture, and people join and love it and stick around for a long time. Cool. Next slide, please. Awesome. And this is just a bit of a snapshot. So when I say global, I truly mean global. So you'll see quite a few locations listed here. In the States, in the UK, Asia as well, and quite a few obviously in Australia and New Zealand, where we have some of our biggest presence. Next slide, please. Perfect. So that's a very, very brief overview of Xero. I hope that gave you a good taster. And we're now going to get into the coding section of the presentation. So I'll be handing over to Darren.
Cool. So yeah, coding at Xero, we're just going to talk through at a high level at the moment, just some of the things that we think about for back-end and front-end coding, and then we'll jump into an actual live coding session, which may or may not go really well. We'll have to see. Next slide, please. So specifically, I'll talk about back-end development, and Lena will probably jump in and help me a little bit as well. Next slide, please. I guess the main distinction between front-end and back-end is that in terms of what a user actually sees, the front end is the only thing that they really care about. Very, very, very rarely will they know anything about the back end. So the iceberg analogy actually works really well here. We have the bit at the top that's quite visible, and then a huge amount of stuff behind the scenes that actually drives the front end. I was looking at this before and thinking, actually, this isn't quite correct at Xero either, because I feel that there would be a whole bunch of other submerged ice blocks near the big iceberg here, and then all the iceberg and the submerged blocks would be talking to each other. As far as the user's concerned, they don't know there's anything under the water. But all of those things interacting is super important for us to actually achieve what we need to achieve with our product at Xero. Do you have any extra thoughts, Mia?
No, I think that's pretty great. That's pretty fantastic. Like before I started actually writing code, this analogy would have been really, really helpful, I think, because just understanding just how much happens behind the scenes really true there. Yeah.
Cool. Next slide then, please. There's only 2 things I think that, or maybe 3 things on here that are super important. First one is the cat picture, because it's a pretty cool cat. Second one is business logic. Backends generally are the place that you stick all of your business logic. That's kind of the thing that keeps your company running, that helps you bring in new customers. Doesn't matter how kind of shiny and pretty the front end is. If the actual business logic isn't doing stuff that makes your customers happy, then it doesn't really matter. So the business logic is really, really, really key here. The other thing is exposing data to the front end, that first point. All the backend services that we create at Xero are purely there to wrestle with that business logic, orchestrate some things, and then pass that data up to a front end so that the user can actually view it and work with it. We generally separate these things for a bunch of good reasons. Anyone who's done kind of a little bit of study will know about your whole kind of encapsulation and kind of cohesion, bringing things together that are the same. And I guess a front end has a lot of the same concerns as other front end bits, and the back end is generally a very different beast. And they usually have different requirements around how often they change and the reasons why they change. So we try and keep those things separate. It's just generally good architecture or best practice in the industry. We jump to the next slide. Here's a bunch of logos of things that we use and some that we don't use, but generally these are all texts that help us to, I guess, achieve those back-end, front-end separation. There's also, I guess, a lot of these things in here which are kind of infrastructure. They're the things that you would host a lot of the back-end services on. And so we use quite a few of these at Xero as well. And we'll jump onto the next slide. So specifically, we are a C# company. That's our primary language that we use. We use .NET and .NET Core. There's a little bit of Go, Node.js, and Python floating around. I know that there'll be people in this virtual room who've used those as well and fallen in love with them. But we have quite a pragmatic approach to choosing our tooling. We choose the things that are the things that will get the job done the best way possible and make our customers happy. But at the same time, we also understand that we have a lot of C# expertise in our company because we've been doing it for a long time. So we definitely leverage that as much as possible. We use a bunch of different database technologies. We are primarily based on AWS. And so we use the cloud for just about everything that we do. We build a lot of microservices. So that back end, we try and make it to be not too big, but also not too small. We try and leverage kind of the right size of these back-end services so that teams can own them and change them and kind of handle the change more easily than if it was a really big back-end. We are an API-first organization, which means that we try our absolute best to create APIs for everything that we produce. This just makes it easier for other teams to consume useful things that we might be building. So it means that we get a lot of, I want to say, synergy. We get a lot of other teams able to use things just because we actually created an API for it, rather than having people create workarounds to try and do the same functionality. We use a lot of CI/CD tooling, so we have Jenkins and TeamCity. We use infrastructure as code, which means that for all of our cloud-based stuff, we could blow away the entire thing and then rebuild it if we felt like it, because we have all of that written down as code. It's completely automated. We also have an internal kind of area in the company called Platform as a Service. So they actually provide us with basic platforms that we can run a lot of the front end and back end services on top of, which is really useful for us. It takes away a lot of the kind of extra knowledge you need to be able to run those things. Some of the developers who work on the other side, the product side, don't really need to worry too much about that. We know that the platform people will sort it out for us and make it all run smoothly. That was a lot of talking. Lena, any other thoughts on that one?
I think most of my thoughts are actually summed up by the next picture that we're about to share.
Yeah, let's pass to that one.
Yeah, if we click onto the, yeah, I think this is pretty fabulous. So something that we talked about at the start, Darren said that sometimes, the user only sees the front end and it can be so beautiful, but we basically don't want to end up in this situation where this gorgeous front-end experience that people who interface with the sites see hides a whole bunch of really scary, gnarly technology. So even I think part of being pragmatic, like Darren said, with tech and trying to get the job done, is not just making sure that something works, but making sure that something works in a way where the next person that you hand that thing over to maintain can really make their way through it and can make good, safe changes and modifications to it, can maintain it really well. And yeah, basically we wanna make sure that things aren't too scary down there.
This actually encapsulates why I like being a front-end developer.
I like being in the back so that I can make sure, gotten it.
Give us every, yeah, perfect,
Make sure
yeah.
things are tidy.
And you do mention, you made a good point about how you want to make things nicer for the next person who has to come along, and a lot of the time that person who has to come along later is you. You've been around the code base for a while. When you see, like, who's the Muppet that did that, and turns out that you're that Muppet, that's definitely happened to me.
I think we can pass over to Nick then to talk about the front end.
Cool. So front-end development, yes, the modern JavaScript ecosystem, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a million layers of abstraction. So yes, you're probably familiar with just plain HTML, and it's really easy just to spin up an HTML file and write a little bit of CSS, and you can have a website. And that's really cool. I love the fact that, the code that I wrote in 1994, you can find on the Internet Archive, will basically still render today. So that's pretty sweet that there's still basic technologies underpin all the really functioning web apps that you see out there, much like Xero. Next slide, please. And yeah, so as we mentioned, what's the front end? it presents data to the user and does not deal with business logic. So as Darren mentioned, you know, the actual business stuff, like that gets abstracted to the back end. We just care about presenting data to the user and taking those interactions and then sending back to the back end whatever we need to send back. Next slide. That's one of Kirk's gifts. That's pretty crazy. So front end at Xero. So it's kind of a moving target. So I'm going to talk about the current state of modern front ends at Xero here. So we do use JavaScript and TypeScript. We've really started hammering on TypeScript recently because we do have a lot of people with more back-end experience who just really love their types. And so, you know, extra type safety is never necessarily a bad thing. XUI stands for Xero User Interface. That's our component library. That's one centralized repository of all the buttons, modals, checkboxes, text inputs, fields like that. That's actually maintained by the team that I work on. And the reason we use a component library is twofold. One, basically to make people's lives easier. If you tell 10 devs to write a button, you'll probably get 10 buttons. And so this not only standardizes the experience for the developer, they don't have to do it, and the API is the same across all products, but it also standardizes the experience for the user as well, because we know they're using, it's got the same styling and the same general behavior as well. And the usual front-end stack applies. HTML and CSS is really, you know, the backbone of the internet, and we do use a Sass, SCSS more specifically, to render our styles. And yeah, putting it all together can be hard. Yeah, it's interesting, like trying to spin up like a little personal project. I'm like, oh, you know, let me see if I can do like all this stuff myself. And it turns out to be like, not really that kind of experience. You want the barbecue, and then it ends up kind of like that. Yeah, fortunately, there are tools to help us out. Some of you may be familiar with Create React App, which I believe is on the next slide, and that just kind of abstracts away all of the setup gubbins and kind of lets you be productive straight away. Flip to the next slide, please, Alice. Yeah, there we go. If you're just wanting to get started and you just want the barbecue, you don't want the bricks and everything, hopefully you're familiar with Create React App. There are boilerplates for pretty much any front-end framework you would be interested in. But here at Xero, we use React, so hopefully you're familiar with this, and you probably have kind of used it once or twice before. Cool, so I think that's it for the, that's it for the Cody bit, or the talk about the code bit of presentation. I guess we're going to start to do the code bit of presentation.
Yeah, I think that's over to me then. I'll just point out as well, so we don't tend to use Create React App an awful lot inside of Xero. We actually have a whole bunch of kind of templates or boilerplate code that is kind of the best practice that's been developed within Xero, and we use those to kind of bootstrap a lot of our projects. So we do take the time to try and bring that best practice in-house, figure out the way that it fits best for Xero with all of the other tools and things it needs to work with. And then we kind of make it easy for developers to consume that. Let's share my screen and we'll see if this will work. I don't want to do that. This is going to be fun.
Uh-oh. This is the way we love live coding demos to start.
Give me a thumbs up when you can see the screen. Great, that's a good start. So we're going to have a go at live coding a web service. It's not going to be particularly difficult. It's not going to do anything super crazy. But it's a good example of some of the things that we think about while we're coding at Xero. So it's going to be an API. Most of you should be familiar with an API, but it's kind of this idea of a consistent way of sending requests and getting a response back. I've got an analogy written down in my notes, which is it's kind of like a menu at a restaurant. The menu tells you all the things that the kitchen can actually provide to you. You pick the thing on the menu, and then someone goes away, works on it, and then gives it back to you later. It's kind of a good analogy for a web API or a web service. So this API, we're going to connect to Twitter. We're going to look for top tweets. We want to build a service that will return the top tweets given a particular handle. And we'll delve into that a little bit more in a minute. We're going to use JSON, so it's the classic kind of REST API. JSON is probably the de facto standard on the internet nowadays. It's a bit easier to read than XML. It compresses really easily. It also is super easy to debug because you can just read it right. It's not hard. It also is good when you're developing little projects like this because it doesn't have any validation, which can sometimes be a really bad thing. But if you are trying to develop stuff quickly and test things out, then you don't want the friction of stuff always failing validation as you're kind of changing your proof of concept. We're going to be using C# and .NET Core because, as I mentioned before, Xero is a C# .NET kind of place. That's the main technology that we choose to use. We could totally use Node.js for this. We're going to be using React for the front end, so JavaScript on the back, JavaScript on the front. We could totally do that. But there are definitely some advantages to using a lovely, strongly typed language like C#. There's a little bit of a jab at Nick because we've been having this argument around that for all day, I think. Let's jump over to here and start our app running. So, very similar to your Webpack config. Oh, YAML, I don't like YAML. I think JSON, you could use YAML, but JSON's probably the thing that is the most used in the APIs that I've seen, at least. Definitely YAML for configuration seems to be the way to go. Many of you will have used Webpack. So what we've done here is basically the .NET equivalent of watching or having a dev server. We're watching what we're running. So every time that I change code on the left-hand side here, we'll see it rebuilt, and then we can test it over here. So let me just get the network tab up. You can see at the moment it's working, so that's a good start, but it's not doing anything in particular. Let's go and have a look at the initial controller. So we're using the ASP, oh no, come on Visual Studio, work with me here. ASP.NET MVC, so model view controller, which is a very common kind of pattern that you'll see in web projects, and actually not even web projects, in lots of projects. It's a way of kind of separating out responsibilities for different areas of the application. In this case, we're going to look at the controller. The controller is the thing that receives the request, and then it figures out what it's going to do with it, and then it provides a response back. In ASP.NET, we have a nice framework that does a lot of stuff for us. It makes it super easy to program in. And one of the little conventions is if we have tweets written here, then we know that the controller is going to be called the tweets controller. So let's go find that one. So this is the code that's being hit whenever we run this request here. As you can see, we've got a, let me just click on it. You can see we're doing a request method of get. So this ties to this little attribute here over our method, which is saying that whenever you hit this controller with a get, with this route, hit this controller and look for a get method. So it doesn't really matter what we call this one. Let's call it hello world, and we'll return some data here to prove that I'm actually using the right one. As soon as there's a camera on, I stop being able to type. Okay, we'll save that one and see it rebuild. And we've got hello world. So again, this doesn't really matter. The main thing is that we're telling it where to look for these get method requests. So that's the basics. That's not really doing anything useful for us.
We lost your audio there for a bit, Darren.
Yeah, Darren, I think.
So we're not doing anything useful yet. We actually want to connect to Twitter and use their API to grab some data back.
Oh, you've been
your audio
muted
dropped
again,
again.
I don't know why that's happening. Where did I get to? I think it should be fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this is a method that someone's created for us. And this one will basically do the hard work of connecting to the Twitter API and grabbing a bunch of tweets. Remember, we wanted to get top tweets. So we have some kind of idea of what a top tweet is. And in this case, we'll just go and have a quick peek over here at the API documentation. We want to send in a query or a queue, and we want to say what the screen name is or the handle of the person that we want to find the tweets from. We're also going to grab the popular tweets because that's what a top tweet means to us. And we're also going to grab the top 10. So we're going to use these 3 parameters. So you can see them here. This is then going to go off and do all of the extra authentication that we need. It uses OAuth, I think, so we need to make sure we've got all the right keys and things floating about to use that. But let's give it a go and see if we can get it working quickly. Oh, actually, I missed one thing. First of all, we have this parameter here called handle, but we're not actually sending it in at the moment. That's going to be problematic when we're trying to send a request off to Twitter. We'd really want the request to fail if we don't actually provide the handle of the person or group that we actually want to look up. So let's just quickly add in some validation here. So we're going to check if the string is null or white space. And if it is, we're going to return a bad request, which is a little convenience method that .NET provides, which allows us to basically say, 400, this is not okay, this is not going to work, you need to fix your call as a client. So we'll save that and we'll run it. And we get problem JSON, which is a special type of JSON which indicates an issue. You can see in the networks tab here as well, we got a 400 bad request back. So that's working fine. Let's just test the other case here, which is if we just say handle equals, same thing, we get a 400 bad requests. So that validation looks really good. Let's just change it to Wendy's and we get hello world again. Okay, so we know we've got that Twitter API wrapper. Let's create that now. I'm going to call it Twitter API because we don't care that it's a wrapper here. And you can see here it's complaining because it needs a lot of information. It needs all of that OAuth stuff, so the keys and other things to make sure we've got permission to access this particular API. So because I'm lazy, I'm just going to go and quickly open up a cheat file which contains all of the environment variables, so I don't need to remember them. I'm just going to paste them in here, and you can see it's telling us that these are all the keys in the right order. So that looks good to me. Now we want to do, let's get the raw data back. And the things it wants here are the screen name or the handle of the Twitter user. So let's put handle in here, and let's just say, grab the first 10, because that seems to be a nice number. Once we've grabbed that data, let's return it here. And I think that's everything we need. One thing I will do quickly is we'll just make sure that I've got these variables set on my machine because we're using environment variables here. I'm not going to spit them out to the screen since it is recorded. We've got the 4, so we've got 4 there, 4 there. I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to make this work first time. So once that's built and run, if we rerun this one, there's all the top tweets from Wendy's, which is pretty cool. It worked first time. That's awesome. Let's have a look at the President of the United States. Yep, we've got tweets there as well, so that looks good. That's great. Now, one of the issues we've got here is if you look at the data type of raw data, it's just a massive string. So it's a huge blob of JSON that's being returned, but it's very difficult to manage as a big string. So one thing that we can do is create, remember it's model view controller, so we can create models or objects which tell it how to actually map the data that we're receiving here. My hands are disappearing, sorry. We can map the data over here into the models here so that we can actually deal with them as objects and make things a little bit easier and also type safe because that's an important concern for us. So one of the things we can do is we can say, what is the actual code? Yeah, so we can deserialize the raw data. Now, it's complaining at the moment because we haven't actually given it the type. One of the things that we need to do is we need to say, this is the blob of data, here is the object to map this blob of data to. So we need to actually give it a type here to let it know which thing to map it to. Now, I didn't show you this before, but let's go and have a quick explore. You can see here we've got a Twitter search result, which matches this blob of data here. You can see we've got a status here, and then we have a list of these tweets inside of it. So if we go to tweet, you can see that we have a user, we've got created date, we've got messages, IDs, all these other things here. And so this is actually the tweet in here. I can't really tell where it ends. Inside of the tweet, we also have this thing called a user, and that's a Twitter user, and so we actually have some data about them. So if we provide this Twitter search result class as the model that we want to use to deserialize, we'll actually end up having a format that we can actually work with a little bit more easily. So I'll just close these, and let's go have a look here. So what was that? A Twitter search result. So now everything's happy. We can actually return the search results here. And even more importantly, we can actually say .tweets, because it's now an object, we can actually work with it. So this is going to collapse these statuses down. We're going to see that disappear because now we're actually getting rid of that and grabbing the layer within that. So let's save this and rerun it. And boom, statuses is gone. So now we actually have it deserializing into some objects that we can actually work with. For instance, we could actually say, grab the first one from the list, and you can see all of these properties that we have here. But I'll change that back now. Before I get lost, just let me double check where I'm at. Great. So this works. Like, we could pretty much finish the live coding now if we wanted to, but I've got you for longer, and also this is not very good code at the moment. One of the reasons why is that this is a controller. This is something that its entire job is designed to take a request, orchestrate something, and then handle a response. It shouldn't need to think about things like, what type do I deserialize this data into? How many tweets counts as a top tweets list? These are kind of things that you shouldn't be worrying about, nor should you be instantiating the actual Twitter API here. This is something that should be handled somewhere else entirely. In ASP.NET, or I think it's broader than that, but we have this idea of a repository. We have this kind of class or a container that tells you how you can access data. So let's create, or not let's create, because it's already created. Let's go have a look at that one. So we have a tweets repository here, which is just a simple class. It contains one method, which is get top tweets. Remember that this whole time we've been talking about top tweets being the thing we care about. So this one here is going to encapsulate all of that knowledge about what a top tweet actually is. So let's go back here. I can close that one. Let's comment all that out. Let's say, let's create this new tweets repository. And then down here, oh, actually we can do it here, search results. Come on. Equals tweets repository dot get top tweets. And again, we don't need to worry about the number anymore because that's logic that's been moved away, but we do need to pass the handle. And then I have to remember to put a semicolon at the end because I've been doing Python too long. Okay, what's the problem here? Oh, this is actually returning a list of tweets. So here we actually need to get rid of it. And we can call this tweets. Let's just do that. Right, so that looks to work, and hopefully it builds. It doesn't. No, it's built now. Great. We do this, we get a massive exception. And that's good because that tells us we're hitting the right code path. We look over here, we have this not implemented exception. Fair enough, that's good. Let's go here, grab all this code and move it over to our repository. This is a classic refactoring technique called extract method. We do it all the time. It's part of our jobs as developers at Xero. We make sure that we are always looking at ways that the code can actually be easier to maintain in the future. So one of the things this is complaining about at the moment is that we're actually not returning a value, so we need to fix that. Let's return search results dot tweets. Okay, and then everything's gone good. Let's do that. Hope it builds. And we're back. So it's all working again. Getting the data that we want. We've now got this controller looking a little bit leaner, which is good. It's not having all this extra stuff that's handling kind of what an API looks like. And so we've cut that right down. I'll just stop and pause for a moment to have a drink of water. But Lena, you've got any thoughts to add in here?
Do wonder. I think that was really neat, Darren. Thank you for showing us all that stuff. Now, there's a few tricky techniques that we used in this entire flow. So anybody who has questions, please do pop them down into the Q&A or into the chat. But apart from that, love to see everything moved around. And another really nice thing is you renaming the methods and renaming the variables. I love to see it, because when people are first writing code, if you just leave something named thing or my cool var, you're not gonna know what that is in a few days. So love it. Thanks, Darren.
Cool. You'll notice that we're using. Oh, sorry, Nick, go.
I was going to say the thing I'm currently working on. I think I've renamed the method 4 times now. Just to think I've finally settled on one. It's good.
Naming is a hard thing. Okay, I'm still not happy with this code, because one of the things that we're doing here is every time this request is called, we're actually creating this new repository, which is kind of wasteful. So what we can do is refactor this one. Let's just go in here and we're going to refactor it. We're going to make it read-only as well, because once you've set it, you don't really need to look at it again. You don't need to keep rewriting it, so we'll do it once. And so that looks a bit better. We're going to go and do this over here as well. So the Twitter API wrapper, we don't want to, every time we call this, create a new one. So let's go through and refactor this as well. Again, refactoring is good. We do it all the time. And hopefully, if I save everything, it still works. Good. So that's a good refactoring, one that doesn't break everything. So there's still a big issue here, and that is that we are creating this particular object within this constructor. And what that is it's violating this dependency inversion principle. The idea is that you don't want high-level modules like a controller to depend on concrete instances of very low-level modules like a repository or a Twitter API. It's actually something that may seem fine now, but it's going to catch us out at some point as this solution grows. So we make sure that we use this idea of dependency injection quite a lot. And one of the ways to get towards dependency injection is to use interfaces, which many of you will be aware of. They're super useful. They basically don't care what the thing is, as long as it looks like some kind of interface, or as long as it implements that interface, we're happy to use it. So you may have heard the walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck. These are just ways of saying if it behaves a certain way, we'll just use it. It doesn't matter what it actually is, we'll just use it as if it was that thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to use an interface. And we'll get rid of, we're going to put this in the constructor here as well. So we're going to pass this in from now on. So now we're going to set this in the constructor and we're going to use the interface. We're going to do the same thing for the controller because we have the same issue with the repository here. So tweets repository. And then we're going to grab this one and we're going to set it here. Okay, so this is just making things a bit cleaner. It means we're not depending on a particular implementation. We just say, as long as it acts like a tweets repository, we're fine. That's great. This is something where we want to set things kind of dynamically. It will enable things like testing and change later. Let's save that and then let's rerun it. Oh, we get a massive exception. And this one here is because we're unable to resolve service for type top tweets repositories, iTweets repository. So this is this one here. And that makes sense because it looks like it should work. We're kind of passing all the right variables in, but we haven't actually told the framework or .NET exactly what concrete implementation we want to use here. We've said that we're really happy to work with interfaces, that's great, but underneath the hood, it still needs to know what's the exact thing that will be used to implement that interface. Fortunately, I have some pre-prepared code that has been uncommented. So if we enable these things, it means whenever the framework sees this tweets repository interface, it's going to fill it in with a tweets repository instance. And the same thing here, whenever it gets asked for an iTwitter API wrapper, it's going to fill it in with the Twitter API wrapper with all the correct environment variables there. This is something you can see the power here for like testing. It means that if you wanted to actually test a whole bunch of things, you could give it a pretend version of one of these instances. So you could say, if I wanted to run unit tests, don't give it the real repository that tries to connect to Twitter, just give it a pretend one that looks and acts the same, but actually just connects to a file or to a bunch of code written in one method, like a blob of JSON somewhere. So let's save this and rerun it. And we're working again. So this is awesome. We've actually ended up with all of the dependency injection handling all of this interface magic for us, which is a great place to be. Is anything wrong with our code now? I actually think I've done as much as we were going to do for this live coding. So we can see that the tweets controller now looks pretty simple. It's not using concrete instances of anything directly here. This controller is just basically depending on interfaces, which is where we want to be. It's not perfect. If we were actually doing this at Xero, we would be looking at unit testing. We would make sure that there's integration tests to cover all of this as well. We would also probably go through and change a whole bunch of this to use asynchronous methods, because one of the most powerful features of the .NET platform is concurrency. And we can actually have a really, really rocket fast web service if we provide some of those asynchronous calls in there. But that's okay for now. The other thing that we would probably do if we were to productionize this at Xero is we'd actually Dockerize it. So we'd put it in a container, build a Docker image from it, put it in a container, and then use that to run on. Remember we talked about our platforms. That's something that we can give to our platform team, and then they can run it for us. It's just a little bit easier to guarantee that we're consistent across all of our environments. Lena, would you like to conclude with any thoughts?
Oh, just a quick one, if I can interrupt. There's just a question from Elizabeth asking, within your team, would you be proofreading each other's codes, or would you split a project into parts and work on them individually?
Oh, that's a really good question. Tell you what, I'll take the question. So in our teams, every team works a little bit differently. So a lot of the time you'll hear the proofreading process referred to as code review. So everybody, so all of our pieces of code have to be seen by at least a couple of folks, or reviewed by at least a couple of folks. So sometimes that takes the shape of somebody writing something and then other people reviewing it and giving the author feedback. Sometimes it takes the shape of people peering on something or mobbing on something and maybe even showing it to someone else afterwards. But also that doesn't mean that you can't do that on separate different things at the same time, because we also use source control. So you could be doing different things and kind of just putting your commits together to make one big, beautiful, cohesive result. But yeah, in terms of what we just made, so that was super fast. Hey, Darren, I wonder, will people be able to see this code later if they want to go through it?
I'm not sure. We can probably provide something. I don't think we have in the past, but it's something we can look into. Yeah, definitely.
If you're interested, let us know. Also, if you're interested in any of the specific things that we mentioned, so and you would like any analogies, also let us know. I love analogies. Like, for example, dependency injection. I like to think of it as we do dependency injection in our daily lives every day. Maybe I am making breakfast and I would like to make a cereal. I don't go ahead and grow my own grains. I just expect that there will be a box labeled cereal, and whatever's in there will behave like cereal, and I just dump it into the bowl because I don't have time to tend to my crops in the morning. Yeah, love it.
Well, can I just jump in with another question, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
So from Naveen, who's asked, I was wondering with regards to the different teams, how frequently you are pushing code or aiming to, and is there a standard developmental life cycle, or is it more team specific?
I don't know. Do you want to take this one?
Well, just like everything else, it's very team dependent. I was actually having a conversation with one of my coworkers yesterday about, like, how we're ideally, if we maintain a service and we ship something that's broken, that we'll be able to fix it very fast. That is something that we definitely want to do. We want to be able to release as quickly as possible. What I do, though, I work on a library that's consumed by other developers, and so the stuff that Lena's working on is tied closely to the version, a version of the thing that I do. So if I release 5 versions of my thing a day, and then Lena's got to do all that updating, she's not going to be very happy with me. That also kind of goes back to the project that you're working on, is taking an older part of Xero that's become this kind of big lumbering beast of a thing and being able to break out that functionality. Yeah, so basically right now she's growing the oats. And this is more like, boxing the cereal and putting milk in the fridge is what you're trying to do. Is that is that an adequate?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm working on that. This is off the top of my head.
Awesome, thank you. There's a few more questions, but I'm mindful we probably want to. Did we want to get on to Nick's section, or did you want to answer a few more
I
questions
think we
now?
should hand over to Nick.
Perfect, sounds good, and then we can cover the rest of the questions off at the end.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for popping them through on the chat.
A quick question. So how much time would you like me to leave for your stuff at the end? Because I could probably talk quite a while.
Maybe like 10 minutes or 10, 15 minutes, if that's okay.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah,
here we go.
my slides will only take a few minutes, and then the rest of the time can be Q&A. So yeah, 10, 15 max,
Yeah,
please.
that's definitely want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. I saw a bunch of those, saw plenty of questions pop up. Okay, so we're working on the front end of our beautiful project, and here you see a very basic bare bones React file. We are going to write a React front end to consume the API that. What did I just do? Oh, did I minimize VS Code by accident? That's what I did. When people
Can
start
you
watching,
zoom in a little bit, Nick? Just a couple more clicks of Control+.
Sure. There we go. That better? Sweet. All right, great. So this is a very basic. We're going to build a React front end using Zooey, our own component library. We use at Xero to make the stuff that Darren just built pretty. And this is a very bare bones React document. This is running React right now. So we have React DOM is telling React to create an element, to create an H1, a heading 1. And children is going to be the string tweet with 0. And then we are going to tuck that into something called app. And if we move over to Chrome, that's not your smiling faces, we have tweet with 0. And if we open the inspector, we can see that inside the div with ID app, we have a heading 1 that says tweet with 0. Cool. So you could, in theory, write an entire application using these react.createElement calls. But that's not only kind of hard to read, but also kind of gets really hard to kind of reason about after a certain level of abstraction. So we can just go ahead and do something like this. So we can, using something called JSX, which is basically HTML in JavaScript. It's a lot more complicated than that. But if I do tweet with 0 here, I've got a comma that. Save that. Auto formatter's doing its thing. And we refresh. We see it's the exact same thing. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So kind of going back to what we saw earlier, again, you could write an entire like big bunch of HTML in here, but you know, that's not really so great. So why don't we kind of break this out into a little component? And we're just going to call that app. And here we're just going to go, actually I don't have to do that. We can use the implicit thing right here. So here. Sweet. And so what we're doing here now is we're creating this component that's called app that just returns a heading 1 that says tweet with 0, and we're telling React to render our app component into the thing called app. Save this guy up and go back here and refresh, and it's the same thing. Woo! Okay, great. All right, we're going to actually start doing some work now. So what we're going to do, right now this is kind of a basic bare bones. Some of you may have heard of React function components. I'm going to move this over to a class component. Now, for those of you with maybe a little bit more advanced React knowledge, like this is considered probably a little bit old school at this point. But I think it kind of makes lifecycle stuff a little bit easier to explain. So we're going to change this to a class. Component. And then in here, there is a render function. Actually, I need to change this. All right, so what we're doing is we're instantiating a class called app that extends React component. Of course, React component is a basic thing since it's telling React, hey, this is a component, and every React component contains a render method, and this render method is going to output tweet with 0. And so once again, if all goes well, the same thing happens, and it's the same DOM structure. Yay! All right, sweet. Okay, so right now this is just some pretty bare bones HTML. So what we can do is to kind of like provide a nice looking foundation for the stuff we're going to use later. And this is when we start bringing the component library. So this is pretty fun. So we've already imported, imported. This is why we're talking and typing at the same time. I'm just going to not talk. Kill that. Oh, yeah. What is that? I'm missing a paren. There we go. Sweet. Cool. So in this render method, I started to create what's called a React fragment. This will be more important later. Basically, React only likes to render one thing in a component. It only wants one bit of DOM. And so if you want to put, this became kind of an issue when you want to put two siblings close to each other. You used to have to just return an array, but this gives us a little bit more intuitive way of doing that, even if it is a little bit more verbose. So what I've done, I've imported this thing called XUI page header. As I mentioned before, XUI, XUI, Xero User Interface, is our component library, and we've got a ton of these components here. And so what I did is just imported the page header here, and the page header component takes an argument, and one of the arguments takes several arguments, one of which is title. So title is tweet with 0. So now that I've saved that, I'm going to go and refresh, and you notice we don't just have kind of a plain old heading anymore. We have something that looks like it's got a little bit more style. So, all right, cool, cool. All right, so let's add a little something else here. So what we are going to add a panel. Cool. So what I've done, I've imported another Xero component called Xero panel, and this will pretty much, you'll see what a panel looks like. It's basically what it says on the tin. We also have some standard CSS that we load in the background. That's what's providing the styling for that header that we just saw. And so I added a sizing class and a margin class just to provide some of these baseline styles to our panel, and just put some stuff in here in the meantime. And so if I go over here, and it is now auto refreshed, and actually I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better, you will see that we have a panel that says some stuff goes here. All right, fabulous. So let's go in and actually load up some tweets, shall we? So back in here, I think I saw a question pop up, so Lena, you can field that if you can while I'm typing, make it a little bit more interesting for everybody.
So
Don't want to put you on the spot, though.
there is a question here that is probably Nick specific.
Uh-oh.
What are those right pointing arrows? Is that a VS Code extension?
It is a VS Code. It's a setting in VS Code to visualize spaces. So I've got my tab set to 2 spaces. But it looks like the file is set to tabs. And so we'll see this when I save, we have an automatic formatting tool. And so the automatic formatting tool realizes that whoever set up this project, I'm not going to blame Darren, actually uses tabs instead of spaces. So it'll automatically see that, hey, the rest of this file uses tabs. We're going to use tabs too.
Darren is all over those questions too.
Well done.
Fast typer.
I know, I am not. Oh, it wasn't like that. And then down here, we're going to take our stuff out, and we're just going to go. Cool. All right. So talking about the formatting tool, we are going to look at the magic here. We're going to save it, and all of a sudden my spaces got all cool, and it changed all my sorcery, changed all my spaces to tabs. Okay, so I added a bunch of stuff here. Let's talk about what I did. So we want to get the tweets from somewhere. We want to store those tweets somewhere. So in this case, we are going to store it in the state of this component. So when we initialize the state, we haven't done anything yet. So we haven't gotten any tweets yet. So we're going to initialize that state to an empty array. And so now we're going to tell React to when the component mounted. So React has these things called lifecycle methods, and just as it says on the tin, thank you very much VS Code, this method is called immediately after a component is mounted. And so what it does, when the component mounts, it's going to fetch API tweets with the handle of Wendy's. It's going to take that response and JSONify it, and then take the tweets and then set the state to tweets. And then down here, inside my panel, we're just going to stringify the tweets. And if all goes well, Here it is. Oh, isn't that hashtag beautiful? Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Cool. So we can make this a little bit prettier. And I know I'm running a little bit low on time, so I'm just going to go ahead and just chuck some more stuff in here. I think it's coming from yeah, there we go.
I have a perhaps not so techie question, which might be quite easy to field. That's come through. The question is from Mitchell. Is there any tension between the front end and the back end teams at Xero?
We do Anchorman style fistfights all the time.
No, I don't think so. So, for example, in my space, so different teams have different configurations. In my area, we have specifically 2 teams. My team works on the back end and another team works on the front end, and we're literally working on the same, like 2 sides of the same thing. And I don't think there's any tension per se. I think we try really hard to make sure there's definitely a lot of coordination. We try really hard to make sure that we are helping each other out and we look ahead a little bit at what we're going to be working on so that we make sure that we provide each other with the tools that we need. So if, for example, we have a choice as a backend team to work on providing some specific piece of data, we're going to consult with our front-end friends and ask what they would like us to, to provide to them first so that they can get the most value out of that. Ultimately, I think it's just because we all just want to make the best stuff and in the most efficient way. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like you have everyone working on back end sitting over here and everyone in front end sitting over here. Everyone's pretty, woven into all the different teams and all sitting amongst each other. So it's definitely from where I'm standing anyway, looking in, there doesn't seem to be any kind of tension or anything like that. Yeah, team is one of our Xero values. So people work together pretty well here. It's one of the things we pride ourselves on.
I'm almost done.
As someone who's not a developer though, so.
Swear I'm almost done. Just one more import. One more import.
Just one more.
Too fast.
Okay, and hopefully this will all magically. Oh, I did something bad here, didn't I? No. Oh, yeah, need to close this bad boy here. So.
Just while you're doing that, Nick, maybe I can fire one more question at you, which is Zui related. So this is from Michelle. Is Zui inner sourced? Is there any chance that any engineer can contribute to it?
Absolutely, and we're trying to think of kind of a better way to do that now. To kind of more people are using Zui, and so it can get a little bit. Right now, we only have enough people to really build and take on some of the inner source tasks, but we're really looking forward to a way that we can kind of formalize the contribution model. But yes, TLDR, yes, it's inner sourced. I contributed to Zui before I joined the Zui team. Yeah.
Nice.
Then we got one of these here, and then this is the worst part of live coding is you get stuck in one of these. Like I'm sure I'm missing a bracket here somewhere, but I'm talking there. And hold on. Nope.
I was going to say, if anyone can figure it out, feel free to suggest things in there.
Yeah, I know. But oh, you know what?
Kevin said, I think you misplaced the ending tag.
I sure did. Yes, actually, I didn't actually close this bad boy. Thank you.
It was a test. Kevin, you passed.
Yep, congratulations. All right. So,
doing the grand job.
So after the NSR, yes. So here it's kind of, and then no.
You're getting a very realistic view into the daily workings of any developer.
Yeah. Hey, all right, now if I do this, it's going to auto format and it's going to look like nothing ever happened. No shit. Let's just, there. Here we go. I'm getting back there. I'm getting back there. And then, and then wait for it. Yay, bracket colorizer. All right. So,
Oh, very good.
thank you. That's left content. And that should be there.
But honestly, you haven't consulted the internet yet, so
I haven't.
unrealistic.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, there is an extra Zooey content. Yeah. So I open this, and I'm not used to seeing like. Yeah, I'm all zoomed in and stuff. This is weird. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to go to one I prepared earlier.
And there are other kitchens.
Oh yeah, I had my. Now I'm selecting things. What am I doing?
Probably that's one good reason I think why in React you try and keep your components as small as possible, because it's easy to get lost in all the brackets.
Yeah.
So it's like a real life example of one of the benefits of keeping everything nice and small.
Yeah, I think it's also the zoom in too, when you can not, like you can only see like 3 lines at a time. You don't know what your big thing is, but hey, look at this! Look at this now anticlimactic tweets from Wendy's. So let's go in and watch the code that I worked on yesterday. So what we have now in our thing, so we have our page header, and we created a component called tweet list. And so back in tweet list, we have this thing that takes our tweets, and then it returns the freaking content block. So it retrieves this. It retrieves what's called a Zooey content block. And for each of those, so we map through our array of tweets, and we return the content block item that contains the key. React complains if you don't give it a key. And then for the left content, which is another thing you can pass to the content block, you have the avatar, and that takes a value and the image URL of Wendy's head, and then we put the tweet username on there and the tweet text, and then you get something that looks great. And even it has loading states. We would have gotten to that if it wasn't for those meddling brackets. Okay, I've talked way too long. Let's talk about the stuff that y'all want to hear about, the actual grad program, and answer more questions.
Thanks so much, Nick. And maybe we should have this as part of the interview process now, seeing as people came up with solutions pretty quickly there. I think it was.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me and I failed.
It's a good test.
I just want to say Nick is an amazing developer, but there's a thing that happens when you're coding in front of 150 people.
Yeah, bad things.
Good
that
thing.
was really cool.
Realistic
It was really
things.
cool.
This is realistic
I like
things.
it.
Realistic things. Yes, this is my 14-year career in television prepared me for this moment.
And it's also realistic that people might jump in and give suggestions to help you out, even if you are an experienced dev or a new dev. You know, it's all good if people help you out. There's no
no shame in the game.
yeah, no shame. Exactly. That's pretty similar to how we work here. So awesome. Okay, well, let me just share my screen so that I can tell you all about the grad and intern programs that we have. Here we go. We can pick up where we left off. Can I get a few thumbs up if you can see my screen?
Yep, all looking good.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so yeah, this is the main question. Would you like to work with us? I'm assuming that some of you are thinking about it because you've signed up and have attended this call. I'm also recognizing some of the names on the call as people who've already applied. So apologies if you already know quite a lot of this content, but I know that there are lots of people on this call who haven't applied yet and might be thinking about it. So hopefully this will answer some of your questions. And if not, feel free to ask them at the Q&A at the end of the call. So I'll start talking about the graduate programs that we have, and I'm going to talk about both Australia and New Zealand. Applications are already open, like I just mentioned. So we opened on the 1st of March, and for Australia, the applications close at the end of April. But for New Zealand, they're open slightly longer because we have a few other on-campus events in the early weeks of May. So we'll close on the 14th of May. if you apply for the grad program between now and those dates, you are going to be considered for a start date in mid-February, Valentine's Day, FYI, so pretty hard to forget, 2022. So that's the date that you should be free and able to start on, okay? We only have one intake per year, so that's something to definitely bear in mind before you go through the application process. And if you're successful and you start with us, you are a permanent employee from day one. So it's a grad program, but you're not in the process to sort of receive a job at the end of that year. You have a job from day one. You're a permanent full-time employee. And I'll go into a bit more detail about how the program is structured on the next slide. But the opportunities that we have available this year are in Auckland, Wellington, Melbourne, and Canberra. So that's another thing to bear in mind. You don't have to be located in those cities at the moment to apply to those cities, but you will need to move there if you are successful in getting that role. So yeah. Lovely. So what is the grad program like? So this is the same for both Australia and New Zealand. The grad program has 4 rotations, and in those rotations, you're going into different teams for 3 months at a time. So 4 rotations over the course of 1 year. The main thing that we want you to be thinking about and focusing on in this year is learning as much as you can, being a real information sponge, expanding on your knowledge of certain tech stack. So you will be delivering some work as well, but that's not the focus of the year. We really want you to test your boundaries, push yourself, and look at lots of different areas of the business. Maybe do a front end rotation, a back end rotation, a security rotation. You know, really have a look around and see what piques your interest before deciding at the end of the year where you would like to roll off, or as we call it, ungraduate into. So with each rotation, you get a buddy, and they are someone who sits in that team that you're rotating in at that moment in time. And they are basically there to answer any questions that you've got. They might be technical, they might be, you might have some more personal things that you need to confide them in. So they're there to help you every step of the way during your rotation. And throughout the year, you also have a people lead who you'll be reporting into. They're essentially your manager, and they are consistently your manager over the course of that year, and that sort of single guiding light over the course of it. So just a little bit about D&I. So diversity and inclusion on the grad program. Last year we had 42% females on the program, which is awesome. And that is slightly above the industry average in the tech industry for female representation in technical roles. We're also rainbow and gender tick accredited, and we've got lots of other things that we're involved in. So feel free to have a look at our websites to kind of find out a bit more about what we do from a policy perspective, but also day to day. So now jumping into the internships, I'll talk about the Australian ones first, because there is a slight difference between the application process for Australian internships compared to our New Zealand internships. So for the Australian internships, applications are open right now and they close towards the end of May on the 28th. So go to our Xero graduate careers website to see the opportunities that are available there, and they will be based in Melbourne and Canberra. So to be eligible for this, you need to be in your penultimate year of study, so your second to last year. So once you've finished the internship with us over the course of the summer, and it goes from mid-November through to mid-February, you'll then be looking to go back and start your final year of uni. So that's why it's the penultimate year. And at the end of the internship, depending on how everything goes, we'll be looking to offer the interns a role on the 2023 graduate program. So that's really the core reason why we would like people to be in the penultimate year, so that they can go back to their final year of uni and relax a bit and not have to do 1,000,001 interviews for a grad role over the course of their final year when we know you're already busy enough. But yeah, during your internship, you'll be working with real teams on real work and real products, and that's the same in New Zealand as well. So that bit is exactly the same. It's just the application window and how to apply is slightly different in Australia. So just moving on to New Zealand, like I said, the process is slightly different. So we hire all of our interns through Summer of Tech, not through our Xero grad website. So take a note if you're based in New Zealand to sign up to Summer of Tech. It's good to register now, even though we won't be opening our applications until around July. The reason being they do heaps of boot camps and workshops and really cool upskilling initiatives over the course of the year. So do register now and get involved. Xero are one of I believe we're a silver sponsor, and we do lots of different workshops, technical and also soft skills workshops with them. So it's really worth your time getting involved in that, and it's all free. So if you choose to apply from July onwards, we then would look to interview candidates in September time. And again, you would need to be in your penultimate year of study. And it's also, just like in Australia, a 3-month paid internship from middle of November through to mid-February. And also, we want to be able to offer you a grad role at the end of it. So there would be a conversation had towards the end of the internship where we would let you know if you're successful in securing a role on the grad program the next year. Okay. Cool. So just a little bit about the recruitment process. And the best thing to do before I go into this is to look at each role that you're considering, because the application and selection process might slightly differ between certain roles. So just check that out before you apply. But for the majority of the roles, it's, well, for all of them, it's an online application. And then for the majority of them, it's a technical assessment. And we do that through HackerRank. If you're not familiar with HackerRank, do check out their website, because you can have a test, like a pretend test, but it's basically a coding testing platform, and it's language agnostic, and that will take you around an hour to complete. So you want to make sure that you're in a nice quiet space to complete that test. After that stage, we would put you through to a video interview, which is a one-way video interview. So we have 4 questions that we ask, and you record your answer, and then we review it after the fact. If you're successful at all those stages, you're then invited to the final stage, which we call Grad Day. And that is basically a day of 3 different interviews here at Xero. If it's for the internships in New Zealand, we don't host grad days. They're called speed interviews with Summer of Tech, but we can go into a bit more detail about that if we've got time later and if you're looking for internships. But essentially, that's the overview of the process. Cool. Okay. I tried to whiz through that as quickly as I could so that we've got some time for Q&A, because I know we've
We
got
do
lots of
have
burning
lots coming
questions.
through. Yeah, I was just going to say we've got quite a few. So happy to kind of start answering a couple of those. So Harris has asked, what's your thoughts on career changers who are keen to move into software engineering at Xero? 100%, we encourage career changes. We're always looking for people that have got different backgrounds and have got different experiences. I think we've had quite a few grads that have come from different careers. I think one was a pastry chef, one was a car mechanic, one was a medic. So we've had lots of different people that have switched into software engineering. So yes, really encourage that. Another question, how many grad positions are available for 2022? In terms of overall, we'll hire around 50 grads across AU and NZ. But if you want to know kind of a specific location or area, do let us know. That's not just in software engineering. So we do hire grads in other areas such as design, and we have some business related programs as well.
Yeah.
Another question around, are there any opportunities in Sydney? I'll just take that and then I'll pass over to Alice to answer a couple of more as well. So not within the tech space. We do have an internship opportunity in Sydney, but that is more kind of business development type role. So those that are studying commerce and interested in that area rather than the tech side.
Cool, thanks. I can see a question here about applying to multiple locations and whether you're able to do that. So yes, you're technically able to do that. What Ellen and I would probably advise you to do is to try and decide which location you would actually prefer, because at the end of it, you're only able to be considered for one role, further down the line. So please try and decide that before you apply. Otherwise, we can't consider you for all of the locations, and we try and make sure that everyone's got an equal opportunity when it comes to getting a place on the grad day. So I would strongly recommend that you think about that quite hard. If you're really torn, then do apply to both, but please try and explain the reason for it at some point in your CV or your application form. Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
So you technically can, but I would advise not doing that.
Awesome. Maybe a question for our engineers. Is the entire company agile? What frameworks are you using to scale the way you work with remote teams? Who would like to take that?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think most teams are agile. Some are more agile than others. The way they arrange work is a little bit different. We do 2-week sprints. Some do just straight up Kanban. Most, I think, the ones I've worked with generally do 2-week sprints with all your appropriate ceremonies. I call it like lowercase a agile because I guess the uppercase Agile Manifesto A means everybody can do absolutely everything, and we're a little bit more specialist than that over here. So I'm not sure exactly. You can be a little bit more specific about what kind of frameworks you're asking about. I don't know, Darren, you can maybe speak a little bit more to that because you have more other team experience.
You mentioned Kanban, so that's one. I think there's no mandate from the top on exactly which agile kind of framework we should use. It's really whatever fits the team's needs and helps them deliver software. But we do actually have a specialist part of the business. It's a group. I don't remember what the name of the group is, but the titles of the people in it are the Agile Team Facilitators. And so they're there to enable and empower teams to do Agile well and make sure it's working for them. So we kind of have like all these coaches available to us to make sure that whatever the framework, we're delivering what we need to be delivering.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question around kind of switching from between front end and back end. So if you spent a couple of years working in one of those areas, and then how easy is it then to switch to a different tech stack or a different area?
I think in my experience, 3.5 years at Xero, you don't have to go looking for switches. Often the switches are thrust upon you because change is constant at Xero. Everything changes all the time. So I worked on about 4 or 5 different products during my time here, and each of those products had a different tech stack for different reasons. So you tend to move between a whole bunch of different things. But then, yes, there are gazillions of teams at Xero all doing slightly different things with openings all the time, so you can move between those. But I'd also say that you don't necessarily need to move teams. We have quite a healthy community of practice kind of concept within the company, which means there's lots of people who share common interests. Like we have Golang groups, people who don't do it for their team, but just meet up weekly just to chat about Golang and do little hobby projects and stuff. So yeah, we like all of the tech is always around at Xero.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. We had another question around the grad program in terms of rotations and how they're determined and whether grads have a say. And yes, grads do have a say in rotations. So usually how it works is myself and Alice would talk to all the teams across Xero and work out which teams are able to host a grad on rotation. We'd compile that list and then share it with the grad cohort to say these are the options, and then we will take kind of your preferences in terms of if there's a specific team or tech stack or technology, and then we try and allocate grads. Of course, we always try and give everyone their first preference, but it's not always possible if 10 people all want to go to the same team. So we try and do it as fairly as possible, but you definitely get a say because it's your career path at the end of the day. So we want you to have rotations that are in line with your kind of career goals and the experience you'd like to gain.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, if there's a rotation where you've got, say, your second preference, not your first preference, we will bear that in mind when it comes to the next rotation planning, you know, and try and give you your first preference that time. So we try and give everyone a really equal go. And I mentioned earlier that you've got a people lead and also buddies to help you. So they're quite good sounding boards, well, really good sounding boards if you're tossing up, you know, between a couple of different teams or different tech stacks. So yeah, you've got some people to help you figure out based on your goals and what you want to achieve over the course of the year to make those decisions and give us those preferences for us to help place you. So yeah, definitely a lot of input from your side.
Awesome. Had another question around are there a specific programming languages we can choose to complete the technical assessment on HackerRank? Yeah, there's quite a for you to choose from. Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's over 10 you can choose from.
It's
Is that
at
correct?
least 5, and I think we
Oh,
aim to cover all of the main uni and kind of common ones out there. So there's JavaScript, for instance.
yeah, awesome. This is a really interesting question from Elizabeth. So I don't know who would like to take this one. But what do you think's allowed Xero to achieve so much in less than 20 years? I see on LinkedIn that Jacinda Arden visited your offices the other day. She did indeed, so good spot there. But yeah, really good question. What do you think's behind our success in achieving so much in such a relatively short space of time?
I think it's offering the product that people needed at the time they needed it. Of course, I wasn't around for the beginning, but I believe it was one of the first like online accounting platforms, and so that provided a lot of value to a lot of people. And originally, you know, we started off very small, as you saw in the presentation, and so that allowed us to like add features very, very quickly and continue to build, build, and build. It was really important to build up that customer base. And so now that we've got 13 years of this, of all of this stuff, like Lena, the stuff you're working on was written 13 years ago. And so we've gotten where we are, and now this is the time to kind of take a step back and improve things to make it better for the next 20 years.
I think I'll add as well that one of the key things that Xero did really well is produce cloud-based software, and that enabled accountants and partners to manage many, many, many more organizations than they could before, and actually manage them well and do what accountants do really well, which is make really good decisions. So the small businesses have benefited and the accountants benefit. I think it just hit the sweet spot of exactly what the market needed and exploded in Australia and New Zealand because of that. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that might be quite a nice question to end on. Conscious we're a couple of minutes over. There are quite a few other questions coming through. But what we can do, we can drop our email inbox in the chat. And then if you do have any kind of follow-up questions, you can drop us an email and we're happy to come back. Unless any of the presenters spot a question they'd like to answer quickly.
I just saw one which was asked early on, and it's had quite a few upvotes, so I'm keen to answer it. It was asked by Lex, and it said, "Hi, I'm interested in applying for Xero's graduate program. I'd like to ask what sort of quality of work and detail you're expecting our GitHub repositories to have." I think this is a really good question, and in my opinion, I mean, I'm reviewing all of the New Zealand applications, right? And I'm not actually a dev myself, so I'm not necessarily personally in that first instance looking for super high quality code. I'm looking for evidence, basically, that of you proving to us that you are curious and constantly or consistently chipping away at your curiosity for tech, and for development. So that's really the main thing for us to see, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be on GitHub either. It can be on another platform that you want to show us, but showing us basically that evidence that you're passionate and you're curious and you're constantly learning and working on upskilling yourself in the in the tech world. That's what we want to see. So I would say don't worry so much about the quality of it. Just just make sure that you're consistent and that you can show us that. That's really the core thing. I don't know, Ellen, if you wanted to add anything to that as well,
Yeah, no,
or
I think
the
you've
devs.
Yeah, I think you've covered that really well. And I should also highlight, it's fine if it's mainly just university projects that you've got on there. It doesn't have to be kind of projects from, if you've done any internships or anything like that, or if you've done private projects. I think I was speaking to someone the other day and they were quite surprised. They're like, oh, I didn't even think to include uni projects kind of on my GitHub, but that's definitely something. So we love to see your progression, what you've been learning on, and that sort of passion and interest in tech. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's what the grad program's all about. It's a year of learning, right? And being open to learning all this different stuff. So we kind of want to see that that's something that you're already doing. And we're not expecting you to have been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years. It could be literally in the last 6 to 12 months. But yeah, that's basically why, because that's what you'll be spending a whole year doing on the program. And you don't have to be a perfect coder, because we want you to become one with us. So, well, not perfect. No one's ever perfect, but yeah. Cool. Okay. Just wanted to cover that one off before we finished, because I know they've been
Awesome.
waiting for a while for that one.
Yeah, that's a great question to finish on. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for everyone that joined and stuck with us. I really hope you found that session useful. We'll be sending out a feedback form within the next hour or so, and we'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve and moving forwards. And if anyone would like the recording for this, I've just put our email address in the chat, so it's just gradcareers@xero.com. I'll just paste that again, gradcareers@xero.com. So just drop us an email or reply to the email if you'd like the recording, and we can share that.
Can you edit my bit out?
Awesome.
Thanks so
Cool.
much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your days.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.